Hi, I'm Sean Glaze. I'm a results leader.
You're listening to ResultsLeader.fm. Being a thought leader is easy. Getting results is hard. This show is for the results leader who lives and dies by their results. Here is your host and Chief Results Leader, Jonathan Rivera.
Welcome back, boys and girls, to another edition of ResultsLeader.fm. What are we going to do? We are going to talk to another guest expert. Mr. Sean Glaze helps leaders build and sustain more positive and profitable workplace cultures. He's been a coach for years. You're going to hear him channel his inner Wooden. Let's jump into the interview. Sean, my man, welcome to the show. Good to see you again. Are you ready to rock this thing?
Man, I am so excited to share some helpful information. Really enjoy the opportunity to have a conversation with you, John.
Let's rock and roll, baby. Let's give our listeners a quick win. What book have you given most as a gift?
Well, this is going to sound awful, but I guess my most recent book, the one that just came out back in October of 21, Staying Coachable, that's the book that I've probably given away the most. If it's not one of mine, and I'm going to take the spotlight off of myself, I've probably given out Chip and Dan Heath's Made to Stick more than anything else.
Made to Stick. I don't think anybody's brought that to the program, and it's a very good book. So thank you for the reminder on that. Now,
Absolutely.
it is story time, and I want you to think back and tell us a story of how an apparent failure set you up for later success.
Once upon a time, I never expected to be doing the speaking and the writing and the training stuff that I do now, Jonathan. I was actually, for over 2 decades, I was a high school basketball coach. And it's as a basketball coach that I came to a lot of the team leadership and team culture stuff. And I think that you learn to share with people because of your past failures. And so the story that I'll share with you was probably 8 or 10 years into my coaching career, and I had just taken over head coaching position of a girls program. Now I'd been a JV coach for a long time, had some success, had a good bit of talent. When I first took over this girls program, they had won only a few games the last couple of years, and they were down in terms of talent. Go in, you're full of excitement, enthusiasm, and all kinds of expectations because I'd had success and I had a big old bucket of male ego that I was carrying with me into the opportunity. And man, I was all about strategy. We had the X's and O's, and we had the plays and the defense, and we worked on skills and individual development. And at the end of that season, I'll never forget, I'm standing outside the locker room and I'm watching the kids walk by me having come off the court after our last loss of the season in the region playoffs. And we had lost 19 games that year out of the 26 that we played. And that's not a good season. I was frustrated. The kids were frustrated. I remember one of our leaders, her name was Casey, her chin's kind of down in her chest and she's sighing heavily. And this is a kid that was always upbeat. You could tell she was just beat down by the end of the year. And so I get into the locker room and you give the obligatory, kind of end of season, guys, I'm proud of the effort we gave. I'm really excited about our future. We got everybody coming back. It's going to be better. Keep on plugging, trust the process, the whole spiel. And I meant every word, but the message falls flat because inside, I'm hurting too in the midst of the moment. So I go over to a water fountain or water and sink and splash a little bit of water on my face. And I look up, and I'm sure every one of your leaders has had one of these moments where you look into the mirror and you realize it's the person looking back at you that's responsible for making things better. The issue was I had done everything through that first season working with these kids that I knew to do. And I go over and I'm standing next to my assistant coach, and our backs are literally against this kind of concrete block wall in a locker room. And the kids are starting to leave. And there's, Zandy and Caroline, and there goes Casey, and each of them are leaving kind of individually. And my assistant coach is the one who said something that changed my life and obviously has given me the kind of catalyst moment to work with hundreds of thousands of others. He said, Coach, if we're going to have a better season next year, we got to do a better job of building relationships. And that was the ultimate aha moment for me because I'd spent so much time, like I know a lot of leaders do, on strategy And I had completely neglected the culture that would have allowed that strategy to succeed on a much different level. And kind of finish the story. 1 year later, we're in the exact same locker or going towards the exact same locker room at the exact same gym. They were hosting the region tournament the following year, 12 months later. This time, instead of the kids kind of walking off heavy sighs, they're jumping and laughing and screaming and hugging each other like only the high school girls you can, coaching girls basketball at the time, because we had won 19 games, completely flipped the script, went to the state tournament that year, completely same team in terms of people, but a completely different team in terms of the culture that we had focused on. And so that was kind of the beginning of my journey working in terms of changing cultures.
What was the change that you made in the culture?
Everything really began the summer between those two kind of points. And I ended up driving my Nissan Frontier crew cab all around the Southeast and visiting and talking with a lot of college coaches, not about X's and O's and press breaks and inbounds plays, but about what do you do to create camaraderie? What do you do to work with the kids in terms of creating a culture in the locker room and leadership and accountability and all the things that we as an organization, we as a team, me as a coach had completely neglected. And that was the change. We spent more time working on relationships than we did on rebounds. We spent more times looking to create friendships and connections and camaraderie and really focusing upon mission and all the things that obviously now I share with other groups that has grown out of that first season, where when you give attention to something, obviously it improves. And where I had neglected, and we had a lot of issues that had kind of gone unaddressed and were kind of swept under the carpet, when we fixed some of those and we focused upon establishing goals and having one-on-one meetings and beginning to build some of those relationships with the staff and with the kids themselves, and establishing expectations and standards and values and behaviors, and having that opportunity to celebrate some stuff along the way, that completely changed a whole lot of how they showed up each day, which obviously changed our performance.
Sean, what would you say is the most worthwhile investment you have ever made?
I've got a friend of mine who passed away about a year ago due to COVID. And I think the most worthwhile investment I ever made, Jonathan, was paying for breakfasts at Cracker Barrel and having conversations with Coach Tony Engel, who became a mentor and a friend and just one of the best people I've ever known. And he worked at high school and college and even in the pro. And I know him when he was at Kennesaw State and later at Dalton State College here in Georgia. But just a fantastic man, and I'll always treasure those conversations because it wasn't about basketball; it was about people and building relationships and establishing the culture that, again, by that time I had come to appreciate.
In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
I'm going to be a little cheesy, and I think I'm going to point to the book that I just released. And here's why. As a young coach, Jonathan, I was like, I'm probably sure a lot of your leaders, and that I was the command and control. This is the way it's going to be. This is what you need to do. And I was demanding, created a whole lot of resistance the way that I led in terms of wanting my people to change, whether it's changing how they shot a free throw or changing what they did in terms of, how they went about, practice stuff and, some of those accountability conversations. And I was so much into giving advice and telling them how stuff needed to be and this is what you need to change, that I really got a lot of pushback and I got really frustrated with, and dang it, these kids, et cetera. And I think that leaders and teammates, not just in basketball, but whether it's in insurance or in banking or in healthcare or in education, the people on our teams that we know could improve, that we know could help the team more if they would make this change, if they would adopt this new process, if they get comfortable with this new platform, whatever that might be. I think change is accomplished far more effectively when, instead of that command and control, demanding and resistance pattern is broken, because you decide to connect and to be curious. And Staying Coachable really is a story, and all my books are stories, but it's a story that shares 4 questions that, if you follow those questions in order, it really kind of introduces a process to use curiosity to inspire people to commit to change.
I hear you saying curiosity, and I would like to clarify for our listeners. Are you talking about asking better questions and taking an interest in that other person?
Absolutely, yes. And I think that that is the key to not just leading people through change, not just leading people as a teammate and a peer, but just creating connections that are deeper and establishing the trust that's going to give you the opportunity to have difficult conversations when you need to. I think that curiosity is the flip side of what oftentimes we do, which is we make assumptions and we judge and we tell ourselves a story instead of how can I ask a question, like you said, to clarify. And I think you did a great job there. Again, asking a question to clarify gives somebody a chance to not just share with their meaning, but to hear themselves share with their meaning and to create that sense of shared understanding among not just two people, but oftentimes an entire organization.
What are some bad recommendations you hear in your area of expertise?
Let's just do a day of team building. Now, this is coming from a guy, and I'm kicking myself here because I started off understanding that team building is kind of what got me into eventually the speaking and writing, et cetera, because I realized that a focus on culture and connections and building trust and camaraderie, those are absolutely valuable things. I think the mistake that sometimes leaders or managers make is that as business owners or administrators, sometimes we think taking our group bowling or taking our group to a day is going to change behaviors over time. And I think that a team building event, again, I've facilitated hundreds of them, a team building event can be valuable. But team building is an ongoing process, and one time is going to maybe impact awareness and maybe open some eyes and maybe create a little bit. But I think that that catalyst opportunity needs to be followed up by what are you going to continue doing as a leader to maintain those connections, to continue to celebrate, to continue to emphasize those expectations, and to have those one-on-ones and accountability conversations moving forward so that you don't just create some of that, but you sustain and improve it over time.
So I like what you said about, well, I just like the way that you put it, command and control. And I think a lot of people think that's what leadership is supposed to be. But how do you motivate people if you're not commanding and controlling? How do you get them to buy into your vision? How do you get people moving in the right direction?
Oh, well, that was the question of my young coaching career and why I now work with leaders because I was that command and control guy. I was that, hey, here's our program. This is what we're going to do. And you need to buy into my mission. You need to buy into my dream. You need to buy in what I'm trying to do with this program. And that, as you might imagine, that wasn't quite as successful as I would have liked early on. And it took me probably about a decade to, kind of get my head out of whatever black cloud and silliness that I was living in and start to look at others as resources for the team's improvement. And I think buy-in occurs. You hear this, and Gallup sends out the poll every year about American workers and workers across the globe are disengaged and the disengagement of the workforce. And I think that engagement, a lot like culture, is kind of a misunderstood term. If culture is just the behaviors that you and your team allow to be repeated, whether that's in a home, whether that's in a business, culture is the behaviors you allow to be repeated. Engagement is nothing more than how much do you care about the results you're contributing to. And here's the issue in a lot of organizations. People sometimes give effort, but they don't understand how their investment, their effort, their concern, their blood, sweat, tears, and desires eventually contribute to something larger and more significant than just themselves. And so our job as leaders is oftentimes not just to identify a mission and establish a goal, but to help to connect the dots so that even those people that might sit at the end of our bench, even those people who are valuable but don't feel visible, you give them a chance to celebrate and feel seen for their contributions. And you let them understand how what you're doing here in this role is invaluable in terms of accomplishing this that our team is seeking to achieve.
All right, we're about to get into the results portion of the show, but before we do that, I gotta ask you, have you shared the show? If you're digging what I'm laying down here, then I want to ask you to share this show with somebody who will find it helpful. Share it on your social medias. Use the hashtag ResultsLeaderFM, and I'll be looking for you out there. Thank you. Let's talk about results. Why do results matter?
I think that everybody listening is going to say results matter. And whether the results you're looking at are numbers, whether the results you're looking at are smiles at the end of the day, whether the results you're looking at are profits, whether the results you're looking at are a different stock price or being able to sell off the business or making sure that I'm climbing whatever ladder that I've got my sights set on. Results absolutely matter. Here's where I think that sometimes there's a disconnect. What causes results? What actually changes and impacts results more than some other things? And I think that that's where sometimes the conversation needs to occur. It's not just an appreciation of results, because people care about numbers, but I don't think that people oftentimes understand what really contributes to moving those numbers up to where you want them to be. And it's not just strategy. You can have great strategy. Strategy is what you want to get done, but it's that culture that's going to determine how well your strategy is implemented. And if you're not giving time to culture, you're going to end up having that same failure that I did. And you're going to need to look in the mirror and realize, what can I do differently to help my team be a little bit better?
In the last 5 years, what new realization has helped you get better results for your clients?
Oh wow, that it's not about what you know, it's about what people do. And I think that that's something that you see. If I'm in the midst of a keynote, it's not the awareness that changes culture. It's not awareness that changes results. Awareness is absolutely key and vital, but awareness is the first part of that process, because when you're unaware and there's an issue, obviously you're kind of helpless. Once you become aware of the issue, that awareness doesn't change the issue. That awareness begins to give you the curiosity and the appreciation that you need to invest in doing something to change that issue. And whether that is trust or accountability, whether that is recognition, whether that's clarifying goals and mission and giving people a sense of connection and having, there are so many things that leaders can do and take action to create some of those changes. But I think that's probably the key, is me recognizing and then sharing with those leaders who will call me up as prospective clients, whether it's for training something or for a keynote or doing something virtually or in person. That idea of what is the outcome you want and what can we do to make sure that we definitely accomplish that, not just from that one time experience, but what are we going to do moving forward where I can support you with activities and weekly things that you can implement with your team so that ultimately you impact that culture.
Let's talk about you for a second. What area of your business would you like to see better results?
I have been very fortunate in that, when I was still teaching and coaching, I built what was probably the world's most hideous website and sent out some really, really bad, kind of brochures and information, and got enough interest that I was able to build a little bit. And that was, again, probably 10, 15 years ago. And over the years, you're constantly iterating and building new versions of, but I never really had to do a whole lot of outreach. And so where I've benefited is from taking my own medicine. And the idea of, a lot of times people have coaches but they're not always coachable. And I think that for me to not just find a coach myself, but to begin to implement some of that stuff so that I'm better as a marketer in terms of outreach, and I'm being a better hunter instead of just sitting back and being a fisherman waiting for the float to go down.
How do you pick a coach?
I want somebody who has been to the top of the mountain that I'm wanting to climb.
Look at this guy, concise as can be. I love it. I love it. What results are you most proud of?
If you had asked me when I was a younger coach, and I'm just over 50 now, Jonathan, but I was in my kind of mid 30s, I was a pretty enthusiastic guy when you got me in the locker room and on the court. But I don't know that I was always focused on the right things. And it was on the results, but it was without an appreciation of all that was really going to contribute to the results I most wanted. And that success isn't always a straight line. Sometimes you need to take a detour into the relationships and connections and celebrations instead of just working on skills and implementation and that type of thing. So I think that I am probably proudest not of the wins that we achieved, not of the turnarounds that we had in terms of programs, but of the conversations I now have with those players that I coached. To be able to go to Starbucks yesterday morning and have coffee with somebody who's now going to be leading a new division of a company that had found him because he was such an incredible leader at the last location he had worked at, to talk to somebody who is still playing overseas and has built a family, and to have those people that you have helped to hopefully create. When I'll talk with leaders, and obviously for your audience here, our job as parents and as coaches and as leaders is to create great parents and great coaches and great leaders. And I never raised kids. I raised great adults while they were kids. And I think that was one of the things that, if you would ask me what I'm proudest of, yes, it's those conversations and connections and relationships that are ongoing from those that appreciated the opportunities when they were there.
Dude, I mean, that hits close to home. That's what I'm still trying to convince my wife to do a podcast with me called Raising Adults, because too many people are raising kids. That is spot on, my man. So, any parting thoughts for the results leaders who are listening to us right now?
Absolutely. I think that the greatest hole you can dig yourself is to only use the shovel of strategy. And I think that sometimes we get so caught up in investing time and resources and energy and thought about the X's and O's of our industry, of what we need to do to achieve those results in terms of the logical, strategic side, that we sometimes neglect and we put on those kind of blinders, and we don't think about the things that are going to influence the people we're going to depend on to achieve those results. And I think that the single greatest thing that I did as a coach that I'll share with leaders is to implement one-on-one conversations. Leadership happens one conversation at a time. And you can have a conversation with many, but it's in those one-on-one conversations that you have with your people that you can clarify some of the things, that you can build some of that rapport, and that you can help to propel them forward as they develop as people and leaders themselves. And I think that obviously, when I talk about building rapid teamwork and establishing a great culture, I use the acronym GREAT because there's 5 areas of culture that leaders need to focus on. And that's goals and relationships and expectations and accountability and then things. And so we could go deep into each one of those, but ultimately, what are you as a leader doing to not just focus upon the strategy, but to really clarify for each individual in your organization, how do they attach to each of those 5 things, and what can you do to improve your focus on those, because that absolutely is going to change the results you get.
Powerful. One thing I know for sure is our listeners are going to want more from you. So, where can they go?
I would love for them to connect with me. Obviously, I'm on Twitter at Lead Your Team, on LinkedIn, Sean Glaze. You can find me online, seanglaze.net. Obviously, my first business was Great Results Team Building. Still do a lot there with ongoing training and support of leaders. But in terms of books and keynotes, anything that I can do, even if it's as a resource to share some advice or encouragement to leaders in the midst of their circumstances, I'd be thrilled to do that. Feel free to reach out. Let's connect and have a conversation.
We will have links in the show notes. As always, we've been speaking with Mr. Sean Glaze. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. And thank you, results leaders, for tuning in. That is a wrap. That is a wrap for another edition of ResultsLeader.fm. If you are out there getting results for your clients and you want to be featured on the show, go to ResultsLeader.fm now and apply to be on the show. And if you love what you're hearing, share the show, give us a rating and review, do anything to help us get the message out there. Thought leadership is easy, but results leadership is hard. We'll catch you on the next one.
This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.